Don't put your yield at risk, put your trust in proven solutions. Anvil Nitrogen Stabilizer, Super U Premium Fertilizer, and Tribune Nitrogen Stabilizer from Koch Agronomic Services. These products offer higher active ingredient concentrations imitator brands can't match. See the difference at defendyourn.ca.
Joining us right now is DC policy analyst Jim Wiesemeyer. Jim, how we doing?
Always good to be on your show, Sean.
Yeah, lots happening. Don't know where to start. So interesting, in your news update this morning, I saw that U.S. farmers might be a little bit on the teeter-totter when it comes to Trump trade policy, or what's happening with these tariffs?
Well, yeah, farmers are always nervous, not only about their crop and the weather, but also about policy until they get what they want. That's one side. And two, as they see the market, especially China, you're going to, in the next few months, you're going to see China's trade with the U.S. zero, big goose eggs.
Yeah.
And that's going to grow in market psychology. On the other side, they're really worried about getting the corn crop planted, so to balance that. But we're in a high risk environment, Sean. In my speeches, I say I've never seen a time in my 50 years covering Washington politics that a policy-driven environment has such high risk but high benefits. So we're going to see in the next few months, relative to Trump's trade policy.
China's been pretty slow, I guess, is the one way to describe it, getting to the negotiating table. Is this frustrating for the White House, or is this the expected sort of timeline? What's your thought on the pace?
It's been frustrating to President Trump, but he should know that China always plays the long ball. And Xi Jinping, their leader, will not come right away to seek talks with Trump, just because that would be seen as caving into him. I do see by the end of this year, Trump and Xi Jinping talks, unless this relationship continues to unravel. What's interesting is that several of Trump's cabinet people, Peter Navarro, the trade advisor, who the New York Times this week said hates trade, and others, Marco Rubio, are very hawkish when it comes to China. Trump is not so much. That's what's so ironic on this. He wants to deal with Xi Jinping, similar to what we saw in phase one in Trump's first administration. Bottom line, I eventually see another trade agreement with China, but when, I have no idea.
It's hard to, I find, get a rope around when we say we're negotiating a trade deal, the depth to that. Or is it, picking around the fringe? Is it just, stamping a new date on what you were already doing? Because we're talking, what was it, like 90 trade deals in 90 days or 75 in 90 days? Like, we're talking about an astronomical amount. Do they have the capacity to do this at USTR?
No, I don't think they do. And that's what Navarro said, 90 trade agreements in 90 days. Well, okay, yeah. Sorry, take that bet. It's not going to happen. And whenever you're dealing with India, that's the one that we have optimistic news today, because Vice President Vance is over there talking. But I've covered India my whole career. You can get up to the very end of negotiations and they'll either throw in new issues, and it usually never comes to pass. We've seen that in the World Trade Organization over the years. But here's what the market needs right now, because the dollar is plummeting. The bond markets is sending signals they're nervous. Trump is he's fighting the adage, don't fight the Fed. Well, he's fighting the Fed. And I know he's frustrated because the Fed chairman has been political. But the market needs a template of a successful new trade agreement, whether it's with Japan, South Korea, which I think will come about, and the long ball India, because then they'll use that as a template, Sean, to at least get a semblance of stability in the trade policy arena.
Read a couple of reports yesterday that the Trump administration is encouraging trade partners, Japan and there's probably a whole list we could fill in there, to pushing them in regards to how they should be dealing with China. What exactly is the ask here?
Well, the ask is we're separating from China in not all, but most things geopolitically. And so that's where both countries, China is telling, their trading partners, hey, don't work an agreement with the United States at the detriment of Beijing. And the U.S. negotiators are saying, really relative to national security and other things, that they want to cut China off at the pass. This is a major war between U.S. and China, not limited to trade.
Yeah, and what works its way in here is countries like, just use Australia and Japan, for example, their proximity to China, although they don't get along all the time, they have a closer proximity than to the U.S. That's a big rope of trust that you're asking those countries to say, don't do business with China.
Yeah, we call that a conundrum, right?
Yeah.
It's a conundrum on it. And we eventually have to get back to, again, the semblance, whatever semblance is going to be in the future in U.S. trade policy. And that brings up Canada and Mexico. I mean, I think Trump did make a major mistake by taking on Canada and Mexico. So let's hope after your elections, April 28th,
Yeah,
I see stability returning to U.S. Canada relations after your elections, because we have a North American market, and if they want to do that that's not going to be a success. And so I think Kevin Hassett at the National Economic Council, Scott Bessent, the Treasury Secretary, have told Trump that, and he realizes it. We just it's a timeline. I think the Canadian elections are going to push a renewed thrust to U.S. Canada Mexico agreement.
We've talked a little bit on this show about the U.S. strategy in regards to Chinese-made ships and fleets that have Chinese ships in them. There is some overhang here to Canada, which could be shippers going around the U.S. and trying to ship through a country like Canada or Mexico, which is going to create a whole second level tier of issues between Canada and the U.S. What's the strategy here, and what's the update? What are they? Because they've backed off a little bit, right?
Oh, they backed off a lot, I think, relative to agriculture. Have you noticed the Aggies have not complained lately on this, and they were just putting out press releases galore on their fear of this. But when the rules came out, they won't say it publicly, but they were breathing a lot easier now. So I don't think there'll be much impact on the state of agriculture on those rules. Also, they're going to be back end loaded anyway. It's going to be implemented in the future. This will be part of upcoming Xi Jinping and Trump negotiations and their top officials. So this is, I think, a strategy that they're putting out that shot across the bow. This is what could happen. We'll negotiate this to give China something in return to getting something they want from China. So bottom line, Sean, I just don't. Now, I'm not saying there won't be any impact on these terrified on these levies on Chinese ships, but not for U.S. agriculture in a major way anymore.
Yeah, it is kind of a bit of a pattern, right? Throw out a very, very aggressive change of policy tactic. Here's how we're going to deal with this. Everybody goes, whoa, and then everyone runs around for 2 weeks, and then there's a peeling off, and it's like it's definitely a natural course of action for this administration.
Yeah, it's like when you were growing up and your father told you he was going to whack you if you continued to do something. Well, it changed your attitude, didn't it? And so the whack didn't come. It's similar to that, but that's Trump 101. That's how he negotiates, period.
Yeah,
but
yeah.
Again, I say to farmers in my speeches, this thing is really big here because we've got long-term strategy involved here. The thing I can't come to grips is the long-term potential damage this has done to the U.S. reliability clause in trade. And that can have implications where investments in other countries that we saw after the Carter grain embargo, after future sales suspensions. So that's going to be a hurdle that's not going to go away easily. Then you have foreign policy. How do you deal with these things in the future? Because this is not a one-off. We're in a different world right now, which means that you have to have a more flexible foreign policy to take these things into consideration. And that's why this upcoming budget reconciliation measure that I think Congress will pass will hopefully include a major change for reference prices for U.S. farm program crops. That will better be a far better safety net for them, Sean.
Yeah. So I guess to wrap up here, Jim, I want to talk about the Fed. We've heard like you mentioned, the president's not happy with Federal Reserve Chairman Jerome Powell. Now he's given the nickname, I think, Mr. Too Late. Powell's term
and loser, Mr. Loser.
Mr. Loser. Now the term ends in May. You talk about
May 2026. May 2026.
Yes, thank you. It's over a year. Yeah. It's just over a year. You talk about disruption in the market. Dismiss the Fed chair a year early. That creates uncertainty. We could speculate who's going to be the replacement in a year from now, but that move now, Jim, wow.
Yeah, the market adage is you don't fight the Fed. Well, he's fighting it. Now, I understand his frustration relative to, I personally believe that Jerome J. Powell has been political because you'll recall during the Biden years, when he was asked a question, do you think the Biden administration is spending way too much money here, and will that impact your monetary policy? And he shied away from that. He said, well, we don't comment on policy, things like that. Well, he's commenting on policy now. So what was good for Biden is not good for Trump. And that's where your politics comes into play here. Yeah. But Scott Bessent, the Treasury Secretary, told him last week, don't do this because the bond market is already sending signals that your interest rates could go a lot higher than anyone realizes. So yeah, that's a powder keg, but that's Trump. You're not going to stop him. It's just that's Trump.
No, following that one very closely. Any insight into why President Trump endorsed liberal or current Canadian Prime Minister Mark Carney, who is the liberal and not the conservative? I know it probably doesn't get a lot of headlines in the U.S., but people sure talk about it up here.
Yeah, that I'm not quite sure, but I'll find out. I'll ask now on that one. But as I said, maybe he knows where the wind's blowing up there. Yeah, I would think that's probably one reason. Trump likes winners. Okay, and two, maybe he's more willing to deal with him on things. Now, recall, Trump likes to spend money too. In certain areas. Yeah.
Not necessarily a fiscal conservative, is he?
No, absolutely not. And look, he used to be a former Democrat. Look all the Democrats he has in his administration. Even Peter Navarro used to be a Democrat, by the way.
I didn't know that.
Yeah, a lot of people don't.
Hey, Jim, awesome stuff. Always great to chat with you. Thank you so much for joining us here today.
Anytime.